Hello and welcome to the Monday Show via the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove and he is Aaron Stokes, and we are back once again to talk all things Newcastle United. And we're going to focus on their transfer business or their lack of. Got plenty of questions sent in by our viewers and listeners, and we are coming to you, as I said, they're live on YouTube and Facebook and X. We'll be on your audio platforms later on in the day. But if you are watching live, do dive into the comments with any of your thoughts on what we talk about in this episode, or any questions you want to post to me or Aaron. Aaron, welcome back. You good?
I'm good. I must admit, I've got a huge sense of deja vu / Groundhog Day. It just seems like every Monday we're coming on this show and we're getting ready to try and bring some positivity to the viewers and listeners. And yet again, we're here talking about players going elsewhere.
I don't know if I should admit this, but it's been difficult to get into this chair this afternoon, hasn't it?
And you are usually the man who's ready for podcasts come rain or shine. You're always up for it. And I'm usually the one that needs cajoled into it. And today I think you're feeling the effects of 2 years without a first team signing, aren't you?
Well, the sun is shining. The green outside of Chronicle Towers is looking perfect. They've got the big screen at Wimbledon playing on there. It's like, should we just go out and enjoy the sunshine?
Yeah, and just forget all about the summer transfer window and PSR and all this other nonsense.
Well, I'm sure Newcastle United's hierarchy haven't done, but some people are maybe rather jokingly suggesting that they have forgotten about the transfer window because nothing is happening as of yet. I mean, there is some positive news, which we will start with, and that is James Trafford. He looks like he is going to finally become a Newcastle United player. The latest is that the deal is moving ever closer. I know a lot of our listeners and viewers will be pulling what little hair they have left out because it always seems to be moving closer. But this one looks like it certainly is. Not a priority for many, Aaron. But at this stage, as you've said, there's so many years, so many windows without a proper signing. We'll take anything, won't we?
Yeah, we will. And look, it's not a case of just taking anything. And yes, it may not be a priority position to strengthen at the minute, but it's a very exciting signing, I think. A young goalkeeper who is on the cusp of potentially knocking on the door for England in the coming years. A fantastic season in the Championship. Suits Eddie Howe's style of play down to a T. He's a player that the manager has wanted for a long time. Newcastle scouts have admired him for a while. So this deal does tick a lot of boxes. As you say, we suspect that in the next couple of days, a lot of significant movement is going to happen. All that needs to be done at the minute is for Newcastle and Burnley to agree a fee, which it looks like they're getting much closer to doing. So yeah, a little bit of positive. And for me, anybody who's watched or listened to this podcast in a while knows that I've been a big fan of James Trafford. It's really, really hard not to be incredibly impressed with what he did in the Championship last season. So yeah, it's a good signing.
I think England International, the season that he had last campaign, is reasons to be excited. And I think what we need to see, and probably what Newcastle United stars need to see before, as they return to the training ground, we believe a week today, won't it be? They need to see fresh faces. I think for their morale more than anything, and I'm not saying they're going to go in and be really unhappy and start tearing things up, but in the back of their heads, they will be wondering, it's another window. It's we're 3-4 weeks into it, and it's the same old faces.
Yeah, look, the players who are currently in Newcastle United's dressing room won't be immune to what's going on outside. They will know exactly, the sort of stresses that the fan base are clearly under. And as you say, I think just a bit of new blood, just a fresh face through the door will lift morale. Certainly, it'll definitely lift the morale of Eddie Howe, who has obviously worked wonders with a pretty stale and stagnant squad for the last 2 years. They do need more. Obviously, Trafford, we hope and we suspect, will be the first of many. And while it might not be a priority, as we've already touched on, I think it is a position that Newcastle need to strengthen at some form this summer. And I think Trafford is probably the type of man to do it because you suspect he's going to come in, not necessarily be number one, but offer a real good dose of competition to Nick Pope, who's going to, sort of have a rocket to keep a spot.
Yeah, and what do you think it'll do for the fan base just to see that first new player arrive after all this time?
Just a huge sense of relief, I suspect. I think whether you're a fan of James Trafford, whether you think it is a priority position, I think just the fact that Newcastle United have shown a bit of intent and gone out there and got a deal done will be music to the ears of Newcastle United fans.
But there are people who don't agree with this move. Michael, watching live on YouTube, says he does nothing for me, does James Trafford, and he's not the only one to share that opinion. And as I've said on previous weeks, I do have one or two concerns. But again, I trust the transfer team up at St James's Park to be getting this right. You've mentioned it there. You don't think he'll come in as necessarily the number one for Newcastle. He's going to have a battle on his hands. Do you still believe that Nick Pope will be the number one going into the start of the season? Do you still think he'll be here? Or if someone comes knocking with a decent bid, say 10, 12 million for him, do Newcastle cash in?
I think Nick Pope stays this summer. I think Eddie Howe has showed no real inclination to want Nick Pope to go. We know that there will probably be quite a big revamp in that goalkeeping department this year. John Ruddy, of course, might potentially go with options elsewhere. Odysseus Fakadimos, they're going to have to find a home for him, whether that be on loan or permanently. And you suspect Martin Dubravka could be another one to leave before Nick Pope. As for whether Pope retains the number one, I'm probably not the man to ask, because when Nick Pope signed, I remember coming on this pod probably and saying I'm not sure whether he gets in straight away above Dubravka. Turns out he did straight away, essentially. But I don't know. This time is it a little bit different? Trafford's coming in as maybe the younger figure, maybe less experienced. I wouldn't be surprised to see Nick Pope retain the number one spot, at least for the first couple of months of the season.
I think what makes the answer to that question a little bit more intriguing is how Newcastle United play, and especially play out from the back, because we know why James Trafford is coming in and we know why Nick Pope's position as number one is under threat, and it's because he's not very good with the ball at his feet. And I think it all comes down to the speed in which Eddie Howe changes how his defence particularly plays with the ball at the back, because obviously with James Trafford, he's calm, he knows what he's doing with it, he's proven he can play with the ball at his feet. Nick Pope, bit panicky, often kicks the ball out of touch, and it's whether Eddie Howe wants to change it straight away, or does he take a few months, maybe half a season, and the priority is just bedding James Trafford in. There's a few questions until you get to the main answer of the original question, I think.
Yeah, we saw, didn't we, last season, towards the back end of the season, Eddie Howe looked like he was open, or more open than he has been, to change in this formation and style a little bit. We've heard a lot of talk over the summer that potentially he could change his formation up front and go with maybe two up top. That was obviously surrounding the news that João Pedro at one point looked like he might be coming to Newcastle. And then, as you say, do we now see a little bit different at the back this season? We've reported at the Chronicle for a while that Eddie Howe really wants a goalkeeper who can play out from the back with the ball at his feet. James Trafford definitely ticks all those boxes. I suspect there'll be a few nervy moments when he's got the ball at his feet and the East Stand just wanting him to boot it like Nick Pope does, and he won't. But as I say, we've understood for quite a while that Eddie Howe wants this type of goalkeeper in so that they can start playing out from the back more, which you're just not going to get under Nick Pope.
For me, I would play James Trafford right from the off. I think if that's your approach for the next few years, then there's no time like the present to get the ball rolling. When, like, say if you make that change halfway through a season or into the new year, when like you're running out of games, of course you want a good start, but I think people will be more open to mistakes being made in the opening few weeks and months of the season rather than when it really matters halfway through or towards the business end. So for me, if your game plan going forward for the next 8 to 10 years is James Trafford playing the ball out with his feet, then let's just do it from right from the off.
Yeah, and you have to remember, it's not just about what he can do with the ball at his feet. He's a fantastic shot stopper. His record in the Championship last season is pretty recent proof of that. So yeah, look, I'd be very interested to know what the fans are saying in the comments and listening later about whether you would start James Trafford, because I think, just like we are split in the studio here, I think it's probably down the middle, 50-50 as to whether you want Pope to retain a spot or not.
Well, let us know in the comments. We've got Peter Griffin, and yes, his profile picture is that of the Family Guy legend. Thank you for tuning in, Peter. I'm not moaning about a new goalkeeper signing. Ruddy and Gillespie don't play and are part of the coaching staff. Dubs is likely on the way out, and Trafford is really good with his feet and good competition for Pope. Jay says, fantastic news if we get Trafford. Gary says, I'd be really pleased with Trafford. Followed his career for a few years now and genuinely believe he'll be England's number one. I've got a few people saying it's not a priority. Here we go. And it should be elsewhere. But let's know your thoughts on the imminent arrival of James Trafford as Newcastle and Burnley grow ever closer to agreeing a deal for the shot stopper. Just a reminder that this episode is sponsored by Saily, a new eSIM service app brought to you by the creators of NordVPN. You can choose from several affordable eSIM data plans in over 200 destinations. With a Saily eSIM, you'll always need a connection, or you'll always have a connection, rather, when needed. If you've ever been lost abroad or badly needed an internet connection with no Wi-Fi spot in sight, you'll understand what a difference a local SIM card can make. An eSIM provides an internet connection wherever you travel and saves you money on roaming fees. There's 24/7 support with this Saily app, which you just need to download once and away you go. Click the link in the podcast description box for a discounted offer. Get connected and support the podcast. Thanks to Saily for helping us through the summer. Sticking with some positive news then, Aaron. Under 21, the European Championship win for England. Tino Stars versus Germany. I mean, look, we say this most weeks. We've said it for most months. He's just a fantastic player, isn't he?
He is, and you never know, this summer win might have just edged him ever closer. Your transfer valuation of 20 million?
That's just to pick the phone up.
Yeah. Look, no, fantastic tournament for him personally and for obviously the England under-21s, Lee Carsley. If anybody had any doubts about that sort of unusual stint as England manager, I think he's proven his worth again at that level. Look, he has a lot of trust in Tino Livramento, which will in turn, surely do wonders for Tino's confidence, both on the international stage. It'll help his chances massively of getting in Thomas Tuchel's plans, and it will do wonders for when he's back at Newcastle in a couple of weeks as well. Great summer for him.
Kieran Trippier got a very difficult job to unseat Tino Livramento at right back, especially the way he finished the season, of course, at left back, but with Hall coming back to fitness. I'm not quite sure when he'll be back. He's back on the pitch,
back
isn't
end
he?
Of pre-season.
So, there you go then. So, I mean, it's going to be Tino Livramento's spot on the right to lose, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, look, providing Lewis Hall gets over his rehab, which he looks like he's doing perfectly well at the minute, then yeah, it will be that young pairing at the right and left back, which is great. Kieran Trippier, everybody knows my opinion, offers great competition. You should definitely be keeping him, but look, I don't see Livramento dropping out this Newcastle team anytime soon.
Oh, it's just so good. And my prediction of him being first choice right back. And when I said that, I'm sure you laughed at it.
3 years ago, is that? And you keep bringing it up?
Yeah, I'm always going to be bringing that up alongside Liam Delap, who we will talk about maybe later in the show. I'm joking. He was pictured, was Tino Livramento, with Elliot Anderson on Instagram, celebrating the win for England. And if we talk about the biggest regrets when it comes to Newcastle United, I mean, we could sit here all afternoon and list quite a few off, but the sale of Elliot Anderson has to be up there, doesn't it?
Yeah, and obviously the fact that we've just seen Elliot Anderson have such a good tournament on the international stage, and everyone's talking about him being a future England star, and you could get an even bigger move than Forest. Of course, it does sting. I don't think it will ever not sting. And look, I don't like usually when people point this out, but I'm going to be a hypocrite and I'm going to do it. There was some very interesting Instagram comments on that photo of Elliot Anderson and Tino Livramento. Did you see them?
Are you referring to Anthony Elanga?
Anthony Elanga was one of them, but there was also a certain James Trafford who commented Howe. He did spell Howe wrong, the Sunderland way, but he was quickly corrected. But I just think that goes to show if James Trafford does come in, he's obviously got that bond with Tino Livramento. He's obviously played around some of these Newcastle players before. Anthony Gordon's one of them. Elliot Anderson obviously falls into that category of, he's so intertwined with these Newcastle players. It's an even bigger loss that they haven't got him any longer. He's been fantastic. And I think the one thing I would maybe only say to try and make myself feel better about the whole losing Elliot Anderson situation is, would he be this good if he'd stayed at Newcastle? Because he's had a full season where he was just let loose at Forest. Would he have gotten that team under Howe last season? I don't know. So
it is all about opportunities, but he probably would have got in maybe ahead of Joe Willock. Had Joe Linton been injured, you would think. But I think it does come down to opportunities, and he wouldn't have been anywhere near first choice if everyone was fit for Newcastle United's midfield. So that is the other side of the coin that you look at to make yourself feel slightly better about the fact that we've lost to Jordi Maradona. On to, I guess, the main subject of the show.
We can't keep running away from it. We've
trying to push it
we've
away.
Exhausted all the positives, and it's now time to talk about why everybody's here.
Well, I mean, we're going to start on a negative, and it's only going to get worse as the show goes on, because we're going to have a massive rant about PSR in a moment as well. But we'll get on to João Pedro now. Set for Chelsea, £60 million. There's add-ons and all that included in that as well. Reports claim that he only ever wanted to join Chelsea. If that is the case, Aaron, and his mind was always set on Chelsea, there's a couple of questions that I think need to be asked. First, what can Newcastle United do in that situation if a player wants to move to London? If they want to obviously go and chase the big money which Chelsea can offer, and Newcastle can't quite match those wages. Newcastle's hands are a little bit tied in many ways. Second question, though, is if he's only ever wanted to join Chelsea, if Newcastle, again, like they were sort of last summer with the Mark Gee saga, been led up the garden path slightly.
Yeah, I think the one thing Newcastle United desperately need at the minute, after such a long time without any relative to transfer success, is not to be shown up on the face of it by these type of deals when it comes out and you hear Pedro only ever wanted Chelsea, Bryan Mbeumo only ever wanted Manchester United, the list could go on. It does leave Newcastle looking a little bit like they've wasted their time. And I think João Pedro certainly looks like that one. Newcastle put a very attractive offer at Brighton in, which was rejected. There was obviously hope at the back end of last week that would be improved upon and, the ball would get rolling. That was sort of swiftly taken away from us over the weekend. And it does sort of leave you thinking, well, how have they found themselves in this position again?
£60 million? Is he worth that?
I suspect I'll probably be in the minority when I say this, but I think he probably is. I think when you look at someone like Pedro, who can play in a number of positions, Premier League proven, young talent, ticks a lot of boxes for Eddie Howe. Brighton paid $30 million for him 2 years ago. He's since been a regular in the team. I think $60 million was probably fair. I had no real qualms with the price tag. There was obviously a little bit of concern about his reputation and his mentality and his behaviour and his attitude, which we spoke about, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago. But I was sort of willing to put that on the back burner because I really like João Pedro. Now, obviously, that he's going to Chelsea, I never wanted him. It was, I'm glad he's going.
A lot of bullet dodged tweets.
Whereas I think if he had joined Newcastle, those, just like I was ready to put them to one side, I think a lot of Newcastle United fans would have got behind him. But yeah, I think $60 million was a fair price for João Pedro in today's market.
We'll wait for that one to be confirmed, but it does leave Newcastle United now going back to the drawing board. There's no getting away from it. He was a top target. They wanted him to put effort into bringing him here to Tyneside. I guess the big question now, Aaron, is where next?
It's tricky for Newcastle because the reason Eddie Howe wanted João Pedro both this summer and back in 2022 when they nearly got him from Watford is because of those reasons I've just listed. Very versatile. He would have offered fantastic competition to Alexander Isak. He can also play as a second striker. He can also play on the left. He's young. Finding those players in today's market who can tick all those boxes, be happy coming in to be a second choice, to be ample competition to Alexander Isak going into the future, to be able to play off the left and drop deeper. Those players are at a premium. They're going to cost you a lot of money, but also they're probably in quite short supply. So where they go next, I don't know. Again, as I said, I think he ticked quite a lot of boxes for those reasons I've just mentioned. And now it's on the Newcastle talent spotters to find someone who can do that as well.
We've got Gary saying the loss of Pedro opens up the prospect of another exciting player coming into the club. I'm sure the club scouts have a list of exciting talent from across Europe. Jace says if João Pedro or any other player does not want to play in black and white, then we should not be pursuing. And we've got Kevin saying Gordon had a bad reputation and attitude when we bought him. Yeah. There were many doubts, but how sorted out, the same could have been said for Pedro. We're talking about options. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about the chap that Nottingham Forest are set to sign, Igor Jesus, but he, from people you do speak to, seems to be very highly thought of over in Brazil. He's costing them £10 million. We're talking about Newcastle United having to spend clever, even though they do have much more room when it comes to the budget this summer. Is that not the sort of gamble you think Newcastle United should maybe be looking at?
We had this big discussion, didn't we, a couple of weeks or months ago when we were talking about Bryan Mbeumo. Did Newcastle go out and sign that £60 million Premier League established midfielder or attacker, or did they look for the Bryan Mbeumo when he was in France? And clubs like Brighton, clubs like Nottingham Forest are fantastic at doing that. Just look at the profit that they're making on these players. Newcastle, we know, have dramatically improved and increased their scouting abroad. They now have eyes essential all over the globe, trying to find the next talent. They've obviously done it with Grant Kowal. They're doing it pretty much every day and every week with the under-21 players and the exciting talent that they're signing who are not going to come in the first team. You would maybe just like to see a little bit more of that now in the senior side and say, look, do we really need to go and pay 60, 70 million for Elanga when we could maybe... Look, it's hard, isn't it? Because you're not going to get a player of Elanga's brilliance for 10 million, but you might get someone who in a couple of years' time you can sell for Elanga money, can't you? So it's the debate that's going to rage on. As it stands, I know Newcastle haven't signed anyone this summer, but it looks like they're going down the route of we want Premier League experience right now.
I guess Newcastle United are a little bit different to Forest in terms of, I guess, their ambitions and the journey and the project they're on. That's no disrespect to Forest, but we know from what the Newcastle owners and the chairman has said, he wants to be number one. So is it a case that, yes, they could go out and sign these young players? They could sign the Brian Mbeumo before Brentford, but he's going to take 2-3 years to get to the standard that he's at now. And have they really got the time to wait?
Well, they haven't, have they? Because we've just spoken about how they've gone 2 years without a first team signing, really. This is the window, really, to try and make it transformational in the sense that you're going to sign 3 or 4 big names who could arguably walk straight into that team. The jury's probably out as to whether João Pedro or James Trafford are those players, but I don't think they would look out of place in the Newcastle United first team. So I don't know whether Newcastle have that luxury of saying, right, we're going to sign a player for 10 million at right wing, hoping that in 2 years' time he gets to the level we think he can.
Do you think Newcastle United are in a bit of a sticky position now because nothing has been said on the record since that Everton game, and Eddie Howe came out and spoke about speed as we mentioned in the last episode, and with that lack of, I guess, information, there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of frustration with every passing target that goes elsewhere. That frustration grows and it builds, and people want to hear from, whether it be Eddie Howe, whether it be Darren Eales or whoever it be, they want to know what's going on. But at the same time, that's not really the done thing. You don't have a running commentary from clubs about the transfer market, but it does seem there's a bit of a negativity starting to build around Newcastle United's summer transfer window. And we have to say, look, we've only at the beginning of it. I would always say judge them at the end, and then we can talk about the negatives or the positives. And I fully still believe that they will get the job done, simply because, Eddie Howe, Bruno Gomes, people have gone on record and said what a big summer this is. It has to be a big summer in terms of income and in quality. And the owners will know that. The owners will know that. So that's what gives me confidence that come the closure of the window, we'll be sitting here saying, what a fantastic summer it's been. But right here, right now, Aaron, it feels like they need to kind of control the optics in many ways. And I'm not really sure how they do that, because they're not going to come out and reveal their plans.
Sign some players. Maybe
well, I mean, that is literally the only way they can control this in a normal way.
Well, not to just repeat exactly what you've just said, but you've hit the nail on the head there with a couple of things. I think, one, I understand that fans probably want to hear from people in the club, but I think, as we say, it's probably not out of the ordinary that we're not hearing anything from the club. Eddie Howe's still in his holidays, the player's still away. Things are happening behind the scenes. Number two, we've got to remember how early we are in this transfer window. They still have 2 months to get their business done, and crucially, as of tomorrow, when that new PSR 3-year cycle starts, they're in a much healthier position to do that. And 3, what was my third point?
I can go on.
I can't remember. Yeah, but yeah, and 3. Sorry, my third point was, there is so much clamour for word from the club because there's so much fatigue about not signing players. If they sign James Trafford tomorrow, the weight that will be lifted on this fan base, whether you want them or not, they've signed a player, and I think the temperature will just cool a little bit. We won't see this, meltdown that we've seen on social media in the last couple of weeks. I think as soon as they get one through the door, no matter who it is, I think people will just calm down a little bit. And that would be my message, as it has been for the last 3 weeks. We're so early in this window. If you want to melt down in September when they sign no one, I'll be melting down with you. But until then, just
patience,
calm.
But I guess in many ways, Eddie Howe probably didn't help this situation by talking about how quickly he wants players through the door.
Yeah.
And obviously it's never as simple as that, because you're going to have competition and you're going to have battles with wages and fees and what have you. But you can sense the frustration amongst the fan base. So at least on social media, I mean, if you let us know in the comments, are you frustrated? Are you worried yet? Like I said, I've got full confidence that they're going to end the summer in a really, really good fashion. Got Lousy saying Newcastle aren't learning from past mistakes, targeting Premier League proven players at their peak valuation with lots of competition is an error. We've got Dominic saying go big on Attaque. We've got Luke said, how can we still have PSR issues? I understand it's difficult for us, but we have sold Anderson, Mensah and Kelly for 80 to 100 million pounds. And we will talk about PSR in a wee moment. I want to talk about a few players that have cropped up this week, not necessarily linked to Newcastle United, but are potentially on the move. First off, let's talk about Harvey Elliott, who had a storming European Championships for the under-21s. He's made it clear that he's considering leaving Liverpool for first-team football, primarily an attacking midfielder, but can play out on the flank as well. Would you welcome him to Newcastle United?
Yeah, I like Harvey Elliott. I think it was quite telling that one, he said he is considering his future at Liverpool, and two, I think it's ridiculously telling that he can't get in that Liverpool team. It just shows you the absolute abundance of talents that they've got. I don't think I've ever really seen him as an out-and-out right winger. I think you'd see him more as like an attacking 8 or maybe a 10, which sort of makes me think, well, if that's where he wants to play or that's where Eddie Howe's going to play him, is there any real need to sign him? And then again, is he good enough to be Newcastle's starting right winger? I don't think so. But then again, if Newcastle turn out tomorrow and say we're signing Harvey Elliott, I'd say, well, he's a great player. So
it's that versatility, which makes me think it's a deal that potentially could happen.
He's got I think he's better than Jacob Ramsey, but it's that similar mould of a player who can. He's probably an 8, but he can play in different positions, which is why Newcastle like him. So. Look, I like Harvey Elliott. He's coming off the back of a fantastic tournament. He's available this summer by all accounts. He's been tentatively linked to Newcastle as well. So I wouldn't be against it, but I don't think he's what they need right now, more than anything else.
Another name that's cropped up is Tammy Abraham. And I think we spoke about him last summer potentially. And you blew your cheeks out there. And I get it, because he's not a name that you automatically think can come in and set the world alight at St. James's Park. But what really got my interest this morning is he's off to Fenerbahce, or at least
Besiktas.
I've got Fenerbahce written down.
I know he's off to Besiktas.
Does Mourinho not want him? Anyway, he's off to the Turkish.
John Duran is going to Fenerbahce.
Sorry, my bad. £20 million though, which for a man of Abraham's quality, scored 10 goals last season on loan at AC Milan. Is that the worst deal? If you're looking for someone to play backup to Alexander Isak, maybe they're in the same mold, too much of the same mold. I mean, look, I'm clutching at straws here, but I'm just trying to think.
No, I don't think you're clutching at straws, because I think that people can probably find plenty of opportunities where we've spoke about players like Abraham on this podcast in the past, and I remember probably as recently as last season thinking, you know what, that probably wouldn't be the worst deal. I loved Tammy Abraham when he was at Chelsea. Thought it was a great deal when he went to Roma to play under Jose. Now, though, is he maybe just I know he's 27, but is he maybe just a little bit... Has he spent too much time out the English game? Is he a little bit injury prone? Is he the signing that's going to catapult Newcastle to the next level? I don't know.
No, I mean, it's not something that gets me necessarily
And I don't think he would get fans excited as well.
No.
Great player, but I think have Newcastle maybe missed the boat on that one by 2 years.
I'm just thinking about the budget, trying to stretch it as far as possible. And the reason I thought he was off to Fenerbahce is because I didn't click on the story in which I'd read. I only saw the headline. It said to team up with ex-Man United boss as Roma accept £20 million bid. And I thought it was talking about Jose Mourinho for Fenerbahce. But interesting you mentioned Duran there.
Yeah, John Duran obviously went to Saudi in January. Huge deal. He's 21 years old at the time. He's got his whole career in front of him. He's banging goals in for Aston Villa. He could probably have the pick of any club he wanted, and he goes to Saudi. He takes a huge wage, and now he's going to go and play in the Turkish league. So I saw somebody on Twitter saying he's doing his career backwards. So he's getting all the sort of clubs you would join when you're in your 30s out the way, and maybe we're going to see him back in the Premier League when he's getting a bit older. Great player, John Duran.
We've got Dennis saying 100% by Harvey Elliott. We've got everybody in the comments saying no to Tammy Abraham. Like I say, it's not something I would necessarily get on board with. I'm just throwing a couple of names out there to try and see if we can make this budget stretch. And we've got Alexander saying, if they mention Calvert-Lewin, I'm leaving.
Well, I certainly wasn't going to be mentioning Calvert-Lewin, so I don't know if did you have him written down?
No, I didn't. But you know what? It wouldn't surprise me. I know our understanding at the moment is that Newcastle United aren't interested in him. But these frustrations go on.
Well, do you want? I suspect whoever put that comment in the comments there, who was it?
It was Alexander.
Alexander might want to turn his laptop off at what I'm going to read now, because it looks like, I know you can't judge everything on this, but on Odds Checker it does look like Newcastle United are favourites to sign.
That's odds, in it.
I don't think Newcastle United will, but and should I say it? Because it's not me saying it, but just with devil's advocate, he's a free transfer. He's not going to cost you a lot in wages. He is happy to play second fiddle. Is he an upgrade on Callum Wilson? Yes. That's not me saying that, by the way.
You're getting rid of Callum Wilson to replace him with someone who's in the same bracket that you just think every time he sprints.
He's not as badly injury prone. Right. Look, this doesn't. I don't want this to come across as me championing a move for DCL. I'm not. But
Callum Wilson, what's going on there? Look, it's the 30th of June.
Yeah,
his deal is all but up. I mean, tomorrow are we going to see him as a free agent?
As it stands, yes. It's also gone a little bit quiet on Callum Wilson, who's obviously been at the Club World Cup as a pundit. Quite an unusual role for him. As of the start of this month, when there was a lot of talk about him, it looked as if he'd had 2 offers put to him, both rejected. I think Newcastle were dramatically trying to get that wage down from his previous deals, because obviously he's not the key player that he once was. And look, he will have offers elsewhere for probably more lucrative packages than Newcastle will offer, so I wouldn't be surprised if Wilson goes.
We've got lots of people in the comments talking about Bakayoko from PSV. We seem to talk about him every single week, and he is the example people hold up as a man you could go out and sign for half of what you would spend on Anthony Elanga. He's been linked to Bournemouth and other teams, but as you've mentioned a few weeks ago, his season didn't end particularly well at PSV.
Yeah.
Again, not maybe focusing on him, but focusing on Newcastle's transfer approach. Do you think the frustrations they're seeing with their Premier League targets, Mark Gay, João Pedro, Brian Mbeumo, Anthony Elanga, will that force Eddie Howe's hand, Steve Nixon's hand, to go, do you know what? We're not getting anywhere here. We're playing a premium. We can't really afford to waste too much time chasing our tails. Let's maybe jump into the European markets and focus there.
I think just for the way you've outlined it happening there, I think no. I don't think it'll be a case of Newcastle are hitting stumbling block after stumbling block. They're going to now decide to go to Europe. I think all along this summer they will have had their eye on the European market. They will have their targets from Italy and France and, in Bakayoko's case, the Netherlands. But up until this point, it does very much look like, despite having players that they admire on the continent, they have sought real Premier League experience. I mean, pretty much every key target has been a Premier League player or a Championship player in James Trafford. Then you've got the likes of Scalvini from Atlanta, you've got Bakayoko from PSV. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them go to Europe and sign somebody, but I don't think it'll be because target A, B, C and D are all Premier League and they've been rejected for them.
Paul Mitchell will leave tomorrow, 1st of July, last day today.
Yeah.
And at this moment in time, unless something drastic happens, he's going to leave without a senior signing.
Yeah.
I'm going to call that legacy. What does he leave with?
Yeah, look, really, really weird one, Paul Mitchell, because it feels like our Newcastle United and sporting directors just cursed, because we've had 2 really, really highly rated sporting directors come to the club since the takeover, and they've both left under a cloud. Now, I will stand by till the day I die that Dan Ashworth did a good job at Newcastle. People won't like it, but he did. He just left under a cloud. Paul Mitchell, on the other hand, just a real disaster from start to finish. Last summer was a car crash. We thought they'd pulled it round around Christmas time. It looked like everything was on the same page again. And then towards the back end of the season, lots and lots of talk that, it was just never going to work and X has happened, Y has happened. Does he have a legacy? No. Is it a shame? Yes. But I think it's just looked like it's just a deal that was never going to work for everyone involved.
I'm going to ask you this question, and then in the height of professionalism, I'm going to get up and switch the aircon off because it keeps coming on. It's that warm.
Okay.
Are you surprised at how it's ended? Because when he signed as a sporting director, I thought it was brilliant because his reputation when he supported people, he was one of the most kind of chaste sporting directors in the game. It was seen as a bit of a coup that he arrived at Newcastle United, then obviously quite quickly.
Really quickly.
Yeah, it unraveled a little bit, and him and Howe weren't quite getting on, and whether that's ever truly been fixed, I guess we'll never know. People you speak to say it was, their relationship was fine, but they're the only two that can actually answer that. But are you surprised it's ended in such a fashion that A, he's gone so quickly, but B, he's gone without actually doing anything?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Paul Mitchell is the fact that everywhere he's been before Newcastle United, he has been really well liked, really successful. His reputation was, as high as it could have gone. Before he joined Newcastle, there was talk of him going to Manchester United. There's been talk in the past about Real Madrid. He's done wonders at Spurs and Southampton and Leipzig and the Red Bull Group and everywhere he's been, Monaco as well. So I am surprised in that sense that it hasn't worked out in Newcastle. But then on the other hand, after, and I suppose hindsight's a wonderful thing, but after how bad last summer was, am I maybe surprised that it hasn't lasted? Maybe not so much. But real shame though, because his recruitment track record everywhere he's been has been fantastic, and it's a shame that we haven't seen that at Newcastle.
But was he not sort of stung by the whole PSR debacle?
Yeah, of course he was. Absolutely was. And look, I'm not going to say he wasn't. He obviously he was working with one hand behind his back. And I think it is probably worth mentioning at this point that he wasn't just the transfer man. He had a bigger hand in obviously bringing James Bunce to the club. On the medical side of it, he had a huge say in the players they were targeting for the under-21s. He had a big say in obviously signing players like Anthony Cordero. And if you speak to Becky Langley and people who work at the women's team, they can't speak highly enough of what Paul Mitchell's done. But yeah, I think it's disappointing transfer-wise that he didn't get anything through the door.
Go to the comments in the YouTube chat. We've got Andrew saying, is it true Milik Thor is going to Como for £20 million? Well, actually, the latest report suggests he's going to turn the move down because he wants to go back to the Bundesliga. But he was a man who was linked heavily to Newcastle United last summer. Yeah. And look, if he is available for that price, Newcastle should be all over that, right?
Yeah, it was essentially a deal that Newcastle were, quite keen on last summer. Obviously, we know they were in a different financial situation, but a deal for 25 million of a player of that caliber, who's obviously been in and around the German squad, isn't something to be sniffed at. Again, it points to the fact that, is it the worst thing in the world if they go to the European market? And I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't seen them linked with more players in the European market, like Theo, like Tomori, who you're going to speak about here. So yeah, look, I think 25 million for Malik Theo would be a great deal.
Yeah, I mean, Tomori's a really interesting one, but at 27, he's probably over that threshold that they are aiming for. But it certainly seems that most people would like to see them try and target the European market, which again, we don't know the inner workings of Newcastle United's transfer summits and plans. There's a good chance that, like you say, Aaron, they've got the chips spread across not just the Premier League, but also across the continent as well. Plenty of people getting involved in the comments, so thank you very much. We've got Matt saying, fingers crossed, we've had other lines lined up and that Pedro, Mbeumo, Delap, Gay and Trafford are all just smoke screens. I mean, that is a heck of a lot of smoke screens, right, Aaron?
Yeah, that's a lot of bluffing and bluster, isn't it?
Got Lidis saying, never knew Sean Longstaff was doing podcasts. I'm assuming
is that you or me? I don't know.
I'm assuming it's I've got lighter hair than you.
Yeah. Oh, I've never heard you compare to Sean Longstaff.
No, me neither. But thank you, Lidis, for that comment. Jay says we must sell our players ready to go leave to offset some talent in. John says, and he's in the minority here, ladies and gents, and everyone's opinion counts and is valid. I get why fans don't want Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but the stench of PSR is real and pungent and might mean the club will go for him on a free. That's what we've all got to think about,
Yeah.
ladies and gents. There's a bit of a debate going on between John and Niall in the comments. John says the departure of Mitchell might be the best move of the summer. John says Niall says it's another mistake by the club. Thoughts?
As to whether it will be the best deal of summer, we'll have to wait and see. A lot rides on what Newcastle United do, both in who they replace Paul Mitchell with and the type of model they want to look at going forward. And what was the other side of the debate? Another mistake by the club. No, I don't think you can call it a mistake by the club. I think if Paul Mitchell had a reputation for being a little bit of a, what's the word? If Paul Mitchell's
Genius?
if Paul Mitchell's track record before he came to Newcastle was one of uncertainty, and there was previous incidents of him coming and going and clashing, then I think it might be a mistake. But I don't think anybody could have predicted how it was going to go with
It's
Mitchell.
been a bit of a soap opera, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Caesar's theme. I've turned that aircon off and I'm absolutely sweltering now. It is absolutely boiling in this room.
It's
Right.
You've got that ginger skin like Sean looks like.
Exactly. Right. We've got a few questions sent in via email and on Twitter. And a lot of them do concern the transfer market. But we're going to talk a little bit about PSR because it is a farce. We knew it was a farce. Chelsea managing to sell hotels and their women's side as well to avoid a penalty. And now they're just spending like there's no tomorrow, buying every Newcastle United target that gets out there. And Aston Villa have headed down the same route, at least in terms of selling a stake in their women's side for a reported £5.5 million. They've sold a 10% stake. So that allows them potentially to have £55 million of headroom on the PSR accounts. The same has been considered for their version of the stack, which isn't even built yet. But again, they're looking at selling maybe a stake in that, and that can get put onto the accounts and again boost their coffers there. You can't really blame Chelsea or Aston Villa for doing what they're doing, I don't think. The fault lies on the Premier League for having these loopholes which have been exploited, so much so that when they finally wake up and think, oh, this is a bad idea, we better close this, other clubs who haven't taken advantage of the loophole don't want to close it because they want to have a piece of the pie later down the route. That in itself is absolutely crazy when you think about it, that I think clubs know it's a bad thing, but they've gone, if he's done it or if they've done it, I want that. And the Premier League are sitting there helpless, absolutely helpless. But it comes back to the point the Premier League have allowed these rules in the first place.
Yeah, well, on that, there was a Premier League meeting recently where the Fulham fan representative at the meeting brought up the loopholes that Chelsea had, apparently exploited. And the minutes of the meeting show that Richard Masters said that Chelsea hadn't exploited a loophole, as what Chelsea did was permissible. And he emphasised that all transactions were subject to a fair market value assessment, which essentially is the Premier League chief executive saying that's not even a loophole. They're allowed to do it.
You can guarantee if Newcastle United, and I'm not a fan that usually or a journalist that subscribes to conspiracy theories about the Premier League, the cartel will suddenly act. But on this one, I do think if Newcastle United did anything like that, they would look to act.
There's a lot of people that have, rightly or wrongly on social media came out and seen what Chelsea are doing and seen what Villa are doing and say, well, why can't Newcastle United sell the women's team to PIF for 200 million? Now, look, that is not going to happen. Not because Newcastle United don't want to do it, but because that would not be fair market value. You've got to remember that Chelsea's women's team are the most successful in England, if not the world. They are worth millions and millions of pounds. Aston Villa have been a WSL side for years, and I'm not excusing them. Newcastle United 2 seasons ago were playing 4th tier English football in the women's game. If Newcastle United did want to go down that road, they are better off waiting until they're an established WSL side, which is probably going to be in the next couple of years. So that was just my way of maybe trying to, because I suspect there'll be people in the comments saying, why are we not doing it? But yeah, look on PSR as a whole, it just makes a mockery of the whole game. And I think, again, we started the show talking about Elliot Anderson, and we're going to come back around to him because it does sting seeing him in another shirt when Villa are doing this. I mean, Villa, we've all thought are going to be there for the taking this summer. Eddie Howe talked about taking advantage of these clubs. Villa was the one that everyone thought they would go for. And it's been so telling that there's been no noise around Jacob Ramsey in the last couple of days, no noise about Ollie Watkins, all these players, because we knew this was coming from Villa. And it just, whether it's right or wrong, or whether it's permissible by the league, it's just rotten, isn't it, really?
They might have to sell a big name, though, when it comes to the UEFA financial rules, which you could see Newcastle United potentially take advantage of, because the UEFA rules don't allow essentially to sell your own assets.
They didn't let Chelsea sell the hotels, did they?
So I think they were aware at Villa Park that is going to be an issue, because at the moment it's their squad cost ratio compared to the wages.
98%.
It's a little bit out of control. So something's going to have to be done there. But I mean, you look at what Newcastle United could do. Could they sell a stake potentially in the stack? I mean, I don't know the inner workings of who owns what there, but I from off the top of my head, I think Newcastle United do own it. Yeah, but they own the land at the very least. You know, could they even just? I mean, this is getting down and out. Could they just go and buy a hotel in the middle of town, and then a month later sell it?
Look, I don't know. And we were having this discussion off air, weren't we, in the office earlier? And again, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but if Newcastle did something like this, there would be anarchy. There would be marches in the street. There would be protests from rival fans outside the Premier League office saying, how can they do this?
When they were linked to Ruben Neves.
Oh, exactly, in that absolute meltdown. And also, again, something that we were talking about off air, and again, I look at that Allan Saint-Maximin deal now to Al Ahly, I just think, how did they not get more than 23 million from? When you look at the money that is in today's game and what the salaries are spending, again, that just feels like such a missed opportunity. I know we're going off track.
Does it feel like that they're purposely being very, very careful? Like they want to do it by the book.
They want to be, and rightly so. By the way, I don't want them to be breaking the rules and finding these loopholes. It's grubby. I want them to be winning as fairly as possible, and I think Newcastle are trying to be and succeeding in being the fairest run club that can be. And that is what Eddie Howe will want as well, by the way. Make no bones about it. He will not want the club cutting these corners and, it biting them further down the line.
But as you point out, wouldn't be a loophole. Could still
exactly.
Yeah. There we go. But yeah, the wonderful world of PSR just does my absolute nutting. Lots of talk over the weekend about how the PIF are funding Chelsea's transfer spend because they've got the stake in the streaming company. What is it? How do you pronounce it?
DAZN.
DAZN, who of course are streaming the Club World Cup. They've bought a stake in it, or they've got the entire. They haven't got it entirely.
They have got the entire. They bought the rights to the Club World Cup for $1 billion.
Yeah.
They've allowed Channel 5 to stream it for free on terrestrial TV. PIF then kindly bought 10% stake in DAZN for $1 billion. So that rivals out. And then the prize money for the Club World Cup in total equals $1 billion. Now, conveniently.
Yeah, see but the complaint about this, right? I don't buy it at all. The PIF invest in things. This is what they do. This is like people complaining if Disney decided they wanted to do a documentary on Chelsea because they've got a stake in Disney. Are you suddenly going to complain at that? I think we've got to accept and realise, and many fans will do, how minute Newcastle United is in the portfolio of the Public Investment Fund. And they have not invested in DAZN, going, it's because Chelsea are going to win this or Chelsea are going to go far. That's why we've done it. No, they've done it because of what's going to happen in a few years' time with potentially the World Cup and what have you. They invest in things. They look for a return. It's just fallen really in bad luck that one of Newcastle's main rivals is doing quite well and is going to get boosted by it. But I think what we're seeing is frustration, and it's been released. Whatever gap in the wall comes first, and that's I think where everything's heading to at the moment.
I don't. I think the uproar about it, like you, is probably a bit overblown, but I still find it a little bit frustrating. Maybe not frustrating. It's frustrating is the right word. A bit unusual. If the Glazers owned a club in Spain who were mega, mega rich and were buying, £100 million players off Man United's rivals, would it people not be like, hang on, that's a bit weird? Yeah. Is it because it's an investment fund that it's? Is it different?
I think for me, I can understand the frustrations to a certain degree, but a long time I accepted how big Newcastle United is, in my opinion, in what they want to do. Look, they're fully committed. They are fully involved. They want to see Newcastle United be a success. But I think, and this is just me speaking off the top of my head, but I think if you ask them what's more important, the growth of the Saudi Pro League or Newcastle United, they'll probably pick the Pro League. And that's just the way it is. But I accept that a very long time ago.
I think the one reason that's been spoke about so much is because of the money on offer. £1 billion to other football clubs in the world game obviously isn't going to help Newcastle United. But two, I think the outrage should really be that Chelsea and Manchester City and other clubs around Europe can play 7 games this summer in a tournament, and let's face it, shouldn't even be happening because of player welfare. And if Chelsea or Manchester City win this tournament after playing 7 games, they're going to get 75 plus million, which is essentially an entire Champions League campaign. And I think that there's been some good reporting on it. If Chelsea win the Club World Cup, they will have essentially paid for Gittins and Delap and half of João Pedro just from their prize money alone.
Cue the meltdown on Twitter when they do lift the cup. I did see a funny tweet yesterday. I very nearly sent it to you, but it's quite late on. One fan suggested that whatever prize money City and Chelsea get, then every team in the Premier League should get the equivalent. That was their solution. I love social media, mate. It's fantastic. Right, some questions then that have been sent in. Thank you very much, whether you've got in touch over email or on Twitter. However you've done so, we always appreciate you getting in touch. Got Leon saying, why are we dragging our heels in the transfer market? All of the good players we've been linked with are getting picked up by our rivals while we contemplate putting a bid in. Now we are down to the 3rd or 4th choices when it comes to players up front, and the bids we have reportedly made are well below the known asking price. I'm starting to worry, so please can you put me at ease?
Well, I certainly try my best, Leon. Look, I don't know whether it's Newcastle dragging their heels. I think they've been, it might not seem like it, but they have been quite proactive. In June, they obviously made their move for Mbeumo. They made their move for Pedro. Newcastle will turn around and say, look, it's maybe not our fault that these players didn't want to join us because they're going to a team where they can earn a lot more money. I'm just playing devil's advocate there. So I don't know whether they're dragging their heels. I think, as we touched on, there's maybe a little bit of frustration that they're publicly going for targets that they probably know privately have better options elsewhere, and Mbeumo, Pedro being the key ones. But you've also got to remember we're at the end of June. We know that July and the new PSR period is going to have them on a much healthier footing. So yeah, I don't know if they've been dragging their feet.
I mean, confidence that they've got backups, and I don't even like using the word backups because I think every player on that list, while might not be first choice, still are going to be absolutely quality players. We've seen where they've missed out before and gone after someone else, and it's worked out okay. And I guess as well, look, the want and the scramble for signings is accelerated because of the last few barren windows, so it makes it look a lot worse. But as I said in the show, they're going to get the job done simply because they have to. They know this is not a summer where they can fail, so that is why it leads me to be confident about at the end of the window. Drew asks, at what point do you think that Eddie and co look at the situation and say enough is enough? Not backed for 3 windows, sold 2 prospects. He asked the club to act fast, but we're missing target after target, and now it's nearly July. I mean, first thing I would say again is just to repeat: wait until the end of the window to ask to make your judgment. My point of view, I mean, Eddie knows what he's got here. I think Eddie, if they didn't sign the players, there'd be huge frustration, but he would get on with the job. But if anything, if they didn't sign any players, it strengthens his position, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the only way that we see anything like that of Eddie Howe saying enough is enough is if we have another situation like last summer where there's maybe a new figure comes in and they don't gel, or we all remember that Germany interview he gave at Adidas headquarters and said, look, I need to be happy. At the minute, despite the fact they're not signing players, Eddie Howe has a huge say and huge pulling power behind the scenes now, even more so with Paul Mitchell gone. So I don't think we're anywhere near the stage of Eddie Howe saying anything like that remotely. I can't say that strongly enough.
No. Craig says, is all the hard work of Eddie Howe, his coaches and the players being let down by, in his opinion, disorganisation of those above?
No, look, again, I understand the frustration and the comments like that, but
they are trying.
Exactly. They're not saying, look, we've got this money to spend, but we don't think we need to. I think then we would probably say Eddie Howe saying, well, look, enough is enough because you can't not back me again. They are trying to get players done. James Trafford, we think, is going to be the first domino to fall. If in the next 2 or 3 weeks before they play Celtic, after the players come back from pre-season, if there's another name through the door, we will be sat on this podcast talking about how well they're doing in the summer transfer window, and they're finally making up for lost time. I know fans will hate hearing it, but just be patient. A couple more weeks, we promise.
And Dominic says, given that several targets have gone or going elsewhere, do you think it's time Newcastle gamble a bit more by making more signings from abroad? Appreciate the risk as they don't adapt, but huge upsides if they do, and they are cheaper.
Yeah, look, I've said all along, I really wouldn't be surprised if they go abroad, and I wouldn't be against them going abroad. We've seen already this summer that the prices you can get abroad are much cheaper. We keep talking about it, don't we, on this podcast? So yeah, I think fans wouldn't be against that.
We've got Craig saying, with us supposedly in a better PSR position, then why have we recently still been putting, in his opinion, low ball bids in for players? And I guess this goes back to the Elanga thing.
Yeah.
It's well known from sources they want £60 million. Is he worth that? Probably not. Is he worth more than 45 million? I would argue so. Now look, it's the art of negotiation, isn't it? You're not going to head straight in and put 60 million down on the table unless you really, really, really want it. And so I suppose on one hand, people would say, well, actually, that shows massive intent. If you just go and say, right, this is what you want, this is what you get. But of course, you've got to get the best value. I would say he's worth probably 50, 55 million pounds. So look, it's the art of negotiation. You give yourself a little bit of space to build up to the price you're really willing to pay.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with any of that. I think that's a pretty solid answer. I think, and we've got to remember as well, not only that, but they have a lot of positions they want to strengthen this summer in the grand scheme of things. They have not an endless pot of money to do that as well, so they probably need to be saving money wherever they can. And yes, we might be looking for the outside and thinking, look, you're never going to get Anthony Elanga for 45 million, but I don't think that's too far off, as you say, what he's actually really worth. So I haven't really gotten any issue with sort of the bids that they've been putting in.
Well, there we go, ladies and gents. I hope you have enjoyed the show, sponsored by Surly. From me and Aaron, it's been a pleasure, as always, coming to you guys, bringing you all the latest when it comes to Newcastle United. Do hit thumbs up, do hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leave us a rating and review on the audio-only platform. Click the link in the podcast description box to get a discount offer on your Surly eSIM. If you look just over Aaron's head there, you can see the Cup Winners' Cup magazine in a lovely frame. I'll put the link in the podcast description box for you to buy yours. Costs a tenner plus a bit of postage and packaging, but it'll look lovely as it does there on our stands if you're collecting items to celebrate that famous cup win. And we will see you very, very soon.